Hey guys, welcome back to wolfsdenforge. Today we're going to forge tapers. Alright, when you're forging a taper, whether you're going to forge it on hot steel or cold copper, it's pretty much the same. The only real difference is the copper is cold, and as it work hardens you just have to anneal it with a torch to soften it back up again. But the same technique applies, and that is you want to go slowly, gentle taps as you rotate the piece in Smudge Block. I'm using a Smudge Block here, standard Smudge Block, and it's tapered this way and round on the bottom. As you deform it just a little bit, you kind of roll that deformity around the end of the tube. If I were just to take this and hit it once, all I'm going to do is smash it flat. I'm going to have a half moon down here because of the bottom of this, and this side is going to be flat completely. I don't want that. What I want is I want to slowly start closing up this end and turn this into a tapered cone. And you do that with slow, successive, rapid taps. Now, as I mentioned, if I was using steel, if I was doing this to a steel tube, which if you look at the ferrules that are on this piece, that's exactly how these were done. This is steel hydraulic line that I used. The only difference is you have to put it in a forge and bring it up to a good bright heat. And then once you cool down to the point where it's not malleable anymore, you have to heat it up again. Copper is just opposite. You forge it cold. When it work hardens, you heat it up with a torch. But I don't know if you can see this or not, but I'm really not hitting this that hard. You don't want to, and you really don't need to. But you do need to keep rotating it. So now what I'm trying to look for while I do this, when I kind of hit it off at an angle like this, what happens is this side mushes flat, and I end up with a little hump just off the side. I'm going to roll that up and tap that little humped area again. And just kind of chase that around the end of the tube. And as I do that, this end closes up, but the metal gets thicker as I go. So, you don't have to hit it hard. Little taps, rotate around. And you can tell when you're work hardening two ways. One, the first way that most people figure it out is by actually seeing the texture of the metal change. It'll get brighter and brighter as it gets hard. Another way you can tell, well, there's actually three ways. Another way you can tell is by listening to it. The tone will change as you're hitting it. It gets more and more, I don't know, I guess more of a sharp tone as it gets harder and harder and harder. And the other way is you can feel it in your hammer. It'll, even if you're just giving it light taps like this, it'll start giving more resistance as you hit it. And all you do at that point is just warm it up with a torch till it just barely starts glowing red, quench in a bucket of water. Which I'm going to have to do here just a couple of minutes. But you can already see, just from that bit of hammering that I've given it already, how the end slopes down this way. I don't know what the best angle to show this to you guys is, but you should be able to just see it as it's starting to go down. So what I'm going to do at that point is just kind of, now that I've got this working, I'm going to use I like to use flat-faced hammers. This is a traditional ball peen, and it's really pretty flat on this face. So once I get this end going, I can start working back here a little bit, start working on the kind of the crown of this nub. That'll push that in, even this entire plane out. And as long as I match the angle down here on my Smudge Block, I can actually start turning it into a larger cone while I'm still reducing this open end section here. Little taps, just a whole lot of them. And you should be able to see now, like I said, I don't know how well the camera is showing this, but I now have a longer angle, more of a pronounced cone going all the way around there. And all I'm going to do at that point is just keep doing that. This takes a lot less time than you expect, and you can go, it doesn't matter which way you rotate, just as long as you keep going all the way around. As I do this, my hand has a tendency to cramp sometimes because of all the injuries that I have done to it. So sometimes it's more comfortable to rotate clockwise, sometimes it's more comfortable to rotate counterclockwise. So I just kind of let my own comfort dictate which way I'm going, and the metal, of course. Sometimes I get ahead of myself and I need to back up. Or sometimes you need to roll back and forth over the same area just a little bit, because your taper starts getting away from you. And now I have even more, of a wide taper as I go down. So I'll try to show this to you from as many different angles as I can, because I don't know what the camera is really going to see and what it isn't. That's the general idea. So I'm going to do this, essentially, take this off and show it to the camera here. These steel pieces right here, I'm making the same thing for a very similar necklace, except instead of beating these out of steel, and you can see these were actually how these were forged down. You can see all the hammer marks on them. I'm doing the same thing in copper. So it's for a different piece, which actually is in the house. Thought I had it out here in the shop for you, but so this will be for another necklace piece. And you can see that this is, well, I don't know if the camera will pick up the detail or not, but this is picking up the same hammered pattern as the other one does. And half of that's from the Smudge Block. Half of that is from the beat up face of this hammer. This is an old hammer. This is a very old antique hammer that was given to me. One of the few that I use that I didn't actually forge. And I really like this hammer because it adds a nice texture to some of the pieces that you forge with it. Some pieces need a little texture, need a little character. I mean, honestly, if these ferrules right here on this piece were very perfectly, really nice and smooth, it wouldn't look nearly as good as they do with a little texture. So that's why I purposely didn't re-grind down and polish the face of this hammer when it was given to me. It's got character. And all that antique character puts more character into my pieces. That's something you really can't fake that. You really can't replace that. You really can't do it any other way. I mean, I suppose I could take a new hammer and then try to grind little pits and little divots and stuff like that into the face of the hammer to texture. Making texturing hammers is a perfectly valid and actually really excellent technique for a lot of things, but I like naturally acquired texture. If you really do get this technique down, you can use a little bit more pressure. But when I talk about little bits of pressure when you're doing something like this, I mean, I'm going to put my finger in here and hit it just as hard as I'm hitting with this hammer. You notice I'm not yelling and screaming or anything, right? I mean, you're really just kind of, it doesn't take a lot, especially with copper. With steel, I'd have to hit it a little bit harder, but I'm talking a little bit harder. I'm not going to be sitting here wailing on it. Because, again, the one thing you absolutely do not want to do is just smush this down flat. If you give it a whack, that's what you're going to do. Even if you give it a fairly light whack like that. Soft metals, even steel, when it's bright orange, red hot, it's soft. You hit it like that, it's going to squish down, and that defeats the entire purpose. But you can see how quickly I've already got a really good taper going on this. So I'm going to anneal this really quick. Okay, so annealing is pretty straightforward. I have my matte gas torch, Benzomatic TS8000. These things are the best ones on the market. If you want to get one, especially for metalworking, this is what you want. So all you really have to do, heat it till it starts turning red. This torch will do it in pretty short order. Just as I was starting to get color on the end of theirs, see how quickly I went to the bucket. And this is just, a bucket of standard water. Heating it up is what anneals it. Cooling it off is just what allows you to handle it. Copper is an extremely effective transmitter of heat energy as well as electricity. That's why we use it for wires. Second best, actually, in the world. Silver being the best. So, if I left that red hot very quickly down here where I'm trying to hold on to it, it wouldn't be so comfortable to hold on to anymore. So, you can see that the color and the texture of the metal has changed. It's taken on a much more of an actual red color. And they always say copper is red, but it's really kind of a orangey brownish. This is really on the more of a red side. And then of course the part where it's textured just looks totally different. But if you listen, I don't know if the microphone will pick this up. It may, it may not. It sounds totally different. It's much more dull sound. And it'll move a lot quicker as I just give it gentle taps and roll it. Gentle taps and roll. If you have a really sharp ear, you'll be able to notice the tone change as it starts to work harden as I'm beating it. So hopefully there, I know it's kind of dark in here, hopefully there you can see how much more of a taper I got going on. Hopefully I'll be able to see that. So it really doesn't take very long, especially if you anneal when you need to. The first thing you need to know about this channel in here is it's tapered both this way and this way, right? So it's wider here and deeper, and it's narrower and shallower there, so it's a constant taper going up. So, and also this block is tapered on the sides. It's not a flat 90 degrees to itself, right? These angles right here are not perpendicular. There's a little bit of an angle this way, same thing on the other side. So the whole block's sitting a little bit this way, and this edge is sitting up a little bit like that. So when I'm going to do my taper, I have to look at what angle the surface I'm going to have my pipe on is. So I'll do it with a flat side. If I were just sit it flat in there, it sits like this. Well, if I want this much of a taper on my piece, roughly, it doesn't have to be exact, you can eyeball it. That's about the angle I want to sit it at. And then when I'm using my hammer, I want to make a complementary angle right here, right? Whatever this angle is going to be on the bottom, I want it the same to be on the top. I don't want to beat it flat. I don't want to set this at an angle and beat it flat with my hammer. All I'm going to do at that point is just dent this in all the way around here and kind of make a that's another reason why trying to keep your pipe straight is a good thing, because as I roll this around, it's kind of wanting to change my angles up and down, and I have to fight against that as I'm working. This is a handmade piece. It is not going to be perfect, nor do I want it to be perfect. If it's a little bit off, great. That way there's no denying when somebody looks at it that it is a handmade piece. I struggled for years with my own perfectionist tendencies, and they really do you more harm than good. They really do. It's better to leave some flaws in some pieces. Minor flaws, tiny things, not, you know, severely screwed up, but leave a few minor flaws in it. That way, even if somebody doesn't consciously realize it, somewhere on a subconscious level, they will recognize that it's a handmade piece. So, uh-oh. I don't know if you can see that. See how this has become kind of ovular, right? It's because I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing, and I got caught up talking more than hitting with my hammer. Now, as long as you don't get carried away with it, it is easy to correct. As I roll it down in here, I can see that bump coming up and down, so I know where to hit with my hammer. And I don't want to come straight down on top of that bump. I want to start, if it's going this way, or, you know, if it's like this, I want to orient it so it's now like that, and I want to start at like the highest bit of that little hump and try and drive it down in on itself as I go around to make it round again. And you can go back and forth a little bit if that's what you need to do. So hopefully that's round again, right? So, and you can see that I've got a far more pronounced taper now. You can start to see where I'm getting shiny bits here. It's getting hard, so. Hopefully you can see that color. Copper can take that kind of red for a few seconds and still be solid. If you do that too long, or you get a little bit more warmed up, all of a sudden this end is just going to melt right off and you're not going to have it anymore. If you're doing silver, you don't want to see that red. If you see red, you have a about a second to get into water, otherwise you're going to have a puddle. Ask me how much I do that. Yeah, you stop paying attention for a second or two, start talking, you get little silver blobs all over the place. I'm going to start going a little faster. I'm not necessarily hitting too much harder, giving a little bit more oomph, but I am going to go a little faster. Hopefully, it's getting darker and darker out here, and the lighting in here isn't the best, but hopefully you can see that this material is actually getting thicker as I work it. So as this goes down, all that metal's got to go somewhere. This is why you have to take your time. You got to drive that metal into itself. It's a lot easier to do it on a square or a round solid bar than it is a pipe or a tube. That's where it's really, really difficult. But if you take your time, be patient, and just like any other thing in forging, just like anything else in forging, when you start seeing errors and mistakes as you're working, stop and correct them right then and there. Otherwise, those mistakes will grow and amplify till, you know, 2 or 3 cycles, work cycles down the road. It'll be way too late to save it. So, fixing little errors as you go is way easier than fixing big errors at the end. A lot of times those big errors are unrecoverable when you have to start over. So one nice thing about doing stuff like this, it's a great teacher of patience, which is something I don't have a lot of. So you really have to exercise your patience as you do this, which makes you, of course, more and more patient as you do it. Practice makes perfect in all things. Now I'm tapping a little bit harder, I'm sure you can hear that. And the reason being is because I'm working my angle down this way now. I'm taking this point of the taper and moving it back here. I'm going to move it back a little bit further. I want to end up with a cone more or less that long. I can always cut off whatever excess I don't need. It's easier to cut off excess than it is to try and put back what you lost. Somewhere there's a Zen parable in there, I'm sure. Another danger that you have, which I've been meaning to mention, I know I keep forgetting it. You can see this is getting kind of shiny in spots and the texture is getting kind of weird. It's all work hardening. You also see how much wider this taper is now. If you don't anneal, once it work hardens, it'll start cracking and breaking apart, and then all this work that I've just done, well, I'm throwing my torch around like a crazy person. All this work I've just done is pointless. So we anneal again. Alright, we're sneaking up on the finish line here. So, since I want to push that taper back, as I was talking about complementary angles before, I'm going to lay this down a little more, and I'm going to tilt my hammer a little bit more this way so I can make this into more of an elongated cone. So I just thought of something interesting for all of you physics nerds out there. If you want to know how this technique works, like why this is an effective technique, essentially what you're doing, you have this round surface here, and as you hammer it down a little bit, you create essentially a pressure wave, right? A frozen pressure wave. It's the same thing. If you did on elastic material, the way that pressure wave forms, metal will do that step by step, blow by blow. So you have that ridge of that pressure wave coming up. Then what you want to do is catch this, like the corner point, the corner highest point of that pressure wave, and slowly push it down and forward along this piece. And as you do it, you reduce the size and increase the thickness as it goes. So essentially you're chasing a pressure wave all the way around. If you ever watch Ice Road Truckers, they talk about creating a pressure wave on a truck, and if you run all the way to the end of the lake at the same speed, the pressure wave breaks the ice and the truck sinks. So, same kind of thing. Playing with pressure waves is essentially what we're doing. And there's your overly nerdy, completely unnecessary lesson for today. I guess I'm hitting this just a little bit harder. But as I got a wider radius here, more area to work on, the force is spread out, so it's having less of an effect as it would be if I just started on this high point right here. So I can hit it just a little harder. It only takes a second to, a couple seconds to nail your piece. Better than cracking it. Better safe than screwed. Hopefully the flame shows you the shape and texture of the piece a little bit better. I know the lighting sucks. I know the sound sucks. I apologize. I can't afford me no fancy things like lapel mics. But if you would like to drop me a donation at my web store, store.wolfsdenforge.com, and buy me a lapel mic, that'd be fantastic. Oops. In this process, if you want to do this faster, hitting quicker with the same light pressure and rotating faster will do you much better than just trying to hit it hard. But again, you got to find the edge of that little pressure wave and just kind of push it all the way around. Alright, that's looking pretty good. That's looking just about the size I want. Maybe a little bit more this way, but that's pretty much it. So that's how you forge a taper. In a minute I'll grab the whiteboard and show you what I was talking about a little bit better with that pressure wave business. But essentially it's the same idea whether you're using steel, whether you're using copper, whether you're using precious metals, doesn't matter what it is, that's basically the gig. And since I have it behind me, how about this will do. Alright. Hopefully you can see this. Essentially this pressure wave idea is start with a round, start with a round tube, and if I take my hammer face and hit it here, it's going to mush out flat, but develop a bit of a bulge, kind of on this side, right? That's kind of like your little pressure wave right there. This will actually be a little bit rounder, but this is kind of the idea. You get this bulge right here. So on the next hit, imagine I was just rotating this around. You would want to take your hammer face and hit right about there and just kind of push this around. You're pushing this material down and in here, right? At the same time, this little bubble is going to go down this way just a little bit, and you're essentially just going to chase that corner all the way around this tube and slowly make it narrower but thicker. That's what I meant by this whole pressure wave craziness. So Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, by all means, drop me some questions in the comments and I will be happy to answer them.